Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Commodity TV in a new edition of our online interview series. We want to get an update from Millennial Potash, and Farhad Abasov, the CEO, is here with us. Before we start, this program is on behalf and paid for Millennial Potash. Farhad, great. Good morning. Thanks
Good morning,
for
Jochen.
taking the time.
Good morning, Jochen. Good morning. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. And I'm a shareholder of the company, of course. And I must say, again, it looks terrific. You are starting with the environmental and social impact study for your Banio Potash project in Gabon. So please elaborate a bit. What does that mean and what would be the impact for the project?
Jochen, very good morning to you and great to see you. Yes, today we announced that we are starting our environmental and social studies. This is an integral part of overall technical programs that we have to execute in Gabon and finish on our potash project, obviously. And this is also an important part of our mining application sometime in 2026. So we've engaged a company called Artelia. This is one of the top environmental companies in the world. And we have learned many years ago that, we have to always comply with the highest environmental standards possible. So we've chosen to always use IFC performance standards, International Finance Corporation performance standards, which are probably the gold standard for all environmental work, especially for mining. So and we've done that, as you remember, with our project in Ethiopia. IFC was an investor at the time. So since then, we kind of kept doing that. We did that with Millennial Lithium as well. So that's exactly what we're doing. Now, during the environmental and social studies, we'll look at actually everything. So we'll do a full baseline studies. That will include hydrology, hydrogeology. We'll look at soil and air quality, water quality, of course, and everything else. So that is very important. We want to make sure that we have a minimal environmental impact when we start production. And as you know, we are going to use solution mining, so that will, by definition, have a lot less environmental impact than anything else.
Okay, super. So that sounds to me already that you are on the acceleration path to production a little bit.
Well, we definitely have moved from exploration to development at this point, Jochen, because as you know, the second stage of drilling was done. We came up with a significant increase in our MRE. And the next two programs will be environmental baseline studies, environmental and social studies, but also, of course, bankable feasibility study. Now, we have already started on some parts of bankable feasibility study, but we'll announce it officially in the next couple of weeks or so as well.
Okay, super. That would be also my question here. What is the time frame now to finish all those studies? I mean, when you have a bankable feasibility, then it's like, hey, let's do it.
Yes. Well, we are pushing very aggressively on all fronts, and especially on these programs. So we think that we'll be able to finish bankable feasibility probably by, August, September next year. The environmental may take a little bit longer because you have to go through the full baseline studies and collecting all the data and so forth. But we have already started on some components of both of these programs. So that will be very helpful. That will help us actually expedite both programs next year as well. So you're absolutely right. We're moving in that direction. And as you know, with USDFC involvement in the next few months, we'll also be working very, I would say, intensively on project financing as well.
Wow. Okay. So you're putting all the necessary steps together. That means 2026 will be a big year for you guys.
Yes, I think, we had a very big year this year, as you know, on the exploration front, but we're hoping that the development project financing sides next year will be really big for us because, again, we think that we'll be able to finish up both of these technical programs, but most importantly, we'll be able to put all our ducks in a row as far as project financing is concerned.
Okay, super. That raises the question because we heard last night that Mr. Trump is again, a little bit on the crazy tariff path, I would call it. And now he thinks about potash from Canada and all those kind of things. But it looks to me a little bit like, maybe not counterproductive, but a little bit crazy as they have to import 97% of their potassium. And also with nitrogen and phosphate, they can use domestic supply, but potassium is especially, I think, the product, what you would produce, also what they want to tariff now against Canada. So yeah, I wouldn't say does that help you in any sense, but I think it's an interesting move
Okay.
for the international potash market, right?
Yeah, Jochen. I mean, maybe we can give our viewers a little bit of insight into what's happening and why Mr. Trump even mentioned that.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. U.S. is a huge importer of fertilizers in general, but as far as potash is concerned, 97% of potash used in the U.S. is imported, and most of it obviously comes from Canada. I think 85% of potash actually comes to the U.S. from Canada. But believe it or not, last year, for example, the U.S. imported even from Russia, despite all this tension, etc. So I think it's not about potential tariffs on the Canadian fertilizers, but it's also important to note what's going on in potash world because the U.S. is not an exception. In other words, the U.S. is not the only country that is so heavily dependent on potash imports. If you look at Brazil, for example, it's pretty much the same, Jochen. It's probably 95, 97, if not percent, if not more, actually is imported from outside, obviously from outside of Brazil. The same thing with India. With India, 100% of potash is imported. China imports probably 70% of its potash. So all these major agricultural countries are completely dependent on outside suppliers of potash. So here, I think we have an interesting angle. Whether the U.S. is going to impose any tariffs on Canadian fertilizers or not, that's a different matter, frankly, and we don't know whether that's going to happen. And that is probably unlikely. That's my personal opinion. But the key thing here is the realization by many governments, including the U.S. government, that they need to diversify away from what we call usual suspects or typical potash suppliers. And in this particular situation, our Gabonese project stands out because we're in a geopolitically neutral jurisdiction. We're in a perfect location on Atlantic coast, so we can feed our potash both into African markets. We can supply it to Brazil. We can supply it to the eastern seaboard of the U.S. So it's really a perfect kind of a combination of factors here for us, a confluence of factors, because we will have low for one of the lowest potash cost structures. The economics in the industry will have also probably lowest cost of shipping to these markets that I mentioned.
Hmm.
But also remember, if you look at the U.S. specifically, there's not a lot of opportunity there, meaning that there's very little potash in the U.S. Um,
Hmm.
there's only one producer that actually is barely breaking even. And if you look at, for example, that particular producer's resource base, it's a fraction of what we already have in Gabon. So, in other words, it will be very difficult to compete with groups like ours. Now, the benefit of our potash for the US market specifically in this case is that we already have US government involvement. We have already US DFC backing. So, it makes a lot of sense for us to obviously target the US market in addition to Africa and Brazil.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, because I thought always your project is a project potash from Africa for Africa. Now it looks to me like, oh, for the US also of interest.
Well, the resource is so big, Jochen, that we can supply eventually significant amount of potash to both Africa, Brazil, and the U.S.
Yeah,
Right? You remember
super.
last year we were looking at 1.7 billion tons of indicated and inferred. This year we're looking at 6 billion tons of measured, indicated, and inferred. So with further drilling, this is going to get larger and larger and larger, and one of the thickest potash deposits in the world. So I
Mhm,
think it will be very difficult to compete against us in those markets in terms of costs. And that's the beauty of this project. Again, the economics, low cost economics, but
mhm.
also the location.
Okay. Do you have already some of the big guys knocking on your door? Probably not BHP because they do the Jensen project now with 7.4 billion,
Yeah.
but there are a lot of others, right?
Well, Johan, if they spend a fraction of what they had spent there, this project of ours would have been already in production. So, yeah, we're talking to different strategics. We're talking to organizations that are quite interested in this project. We're also talking to some potential off takers. So I think all of that will come together next year because the idea is, of course, to make sure that this project can get to production, whether it's going to be on our watch or not. That's something that we'll need to look at in the next few months or so. But it's important to make sure that the project has all the necessary elements, including financing, logistics, offtakes in place, so that it can actually hit production in the next couple of years or so.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Question with your studies now. Can you use them the same way, no matter if you say, okay, we stick with the PEA level or pre-feasibility study level of 800,000 tons per year, but we think larger and we want to do 2 or 3 million tons per annum. Is that the same? Or if you say, no, we want to raise the production level, do you have to do additional studies or is that irrelevant?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Johan. So the studies that we're going to be doing will be relevant to any kind of production scenario, regardless of the size.
Mhm.
So I'm talking about environmental and social and so forth. But at the same time, during bankable feasibility study, we will be looking at 800,000 tons, which was our
Yeah.
base case scenario, and we will also look at something much larger than 800,000 tons, primarily because the resource is so large now that it can actually sustain much larger production rate. So
Yeah.
we'll look at both, but the studies will be applicable to almost any scenario, unless, of course, right off the bat, we're going to go to something massive, which is not the plan. But we will look at something much larger than 800,000 tons to make sure that,
Mhm.
if necessary, there is enough financing available, etc. We can actually push into that scenario right from the start.
Mhm. Okay, super. Last question, but not least, of course, in that sense, do you have the money to fulfill all those program points, meaning that you do the bankable feasibility study ready and done, and then project finance?
Yes, Jochen, the good question is we do have all the money that we need for these programs, including some additional drilling as well. We got about $16 million in the bank. This does not include, by the way, the commitment from USDFC. USDFC has already started releasing those funds to us. The first 10% already came in, and they will be releasing as we proceed with the bankable feasibility study expenditures. Because remember, those are matching funds specifically for feasibility study. Now, on top of this, we also have almost all our warrants. In fact, I think all of our warrants that we've issued over the last 2.5 years or so, they're all in the money. So a
Mhm.
lot of our shareholders actually exercise those warrants, which is obviously welcomed by us because that brings in a lot of additional cash into the company. So our coffers, our cash balance they get replenished on a monthly basis. So that is very important for us because literally we don't have to go to the market anytime soon. And of course, if you see
Mhm.
any kind of a major financing round, et cetera, in the next few months, that will be only with a strategic or with a large institution. And that, again, that will be earmarked, meaning the funding will be earmarked for bankable fees, for CapEx funding down the road. In other words, for project financing.
Yeah, and at a much higher price.
Yes, yes, of course. That's key.
Like
That's
to
key
see the
to
fight.
minimal dilution. Yes.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what I hear from all our
Super.
major shareholders, Johan. So keep dilution to the minimum. And of
Super.
course, we're ourselves
Yeah,
large
exactly.
shareholders too. So I think
Super.
our interests are completely aligned here.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you say how much warrants are left roughly for
Yeah,
exercise?
we got
Meaning how
about
much money might come in?
yeah. So altogether, if they all get exercised, we'll probably get another $15 million.
Okay,
Yeah.
super. Perfect. Yeah, so I think things look really, really great. You're on the right market. And also with that, let's assume the tariffs are coming on potash. Do you see then a major rise in the potash price?
It is possible, but again, I personally don't believe that will be coming. Now, if you actually look at the context of when President Trump actually made that announcement, it was yesterday, I think, last
Mhm.
night, and it was when the U.S. government actually announced a big aid package for U.S. farmers. And that is related also to inflation pressures on the U.S. consumers. The food product. Obviously,
Yeah.
if you go to supermarkets in the U.S., the food prices keep creeping up. So obviously, that aid package to farmers is designed to help bring down the price. So I think any kind of a major tariffs on Canadian fertilizers will be counterproductive for the economy at this point, for the U.S. economy I'm talking about. But again, that brings the importance of diversifying away from complete dependence on one supplier, so to speak, in the case of potash. So I think that is important. But whether
Mhm.
those uh, uh, tariffs will come in or not, that again I doubt. But I think, again, the very fact that Mr. Trump actually mentioned that sends a right message to all the key decision makers in the U.S. government that we need to know, or they need to look at different source of potash, low cost of potash, because if you look again at our project and compare it to almost anything that is available in the U.S., not only development projects, and I'm talking about producers, you will see the benefits of actually supporting our project. And that will immediately help, again, the U.S. farmers. That will, again, in turn help the US consumers down the road as well.
Okay, super. Perfect. So I would say good luck. Merry Christmas,
Merry
Farhad,
Christmas,
to you.
Johan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And all the best, of course. And I would say keep it going as you always do. Hit everything and do some more good drill holes, but especially deliver this feasibility study, the bankable feasibility study, because that would be the super major milestone. Also, if a possible acquirer comes in, because your project is so large, I think the next 50 to 100 years, even on a much higher production rate, you can produce there. And as you said, for Africa, but also for the US, not a problem at all. This is
For the
what I love.
world,
We have,
Johan.
yeah, exactly, for the world. That's optionality, and that's always fantastic. So thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Johan.
All the best for you. Good luck. And we wish you well. Thanks, Farhad.
Thank you very much, Johan.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that was Farhad Abasov, the CEO of Millennial Potash, and you heard it. This is the real top potash project in the world here in Gabon. A great location, great jurisdiction, but also Farhad is working on the bankable feasibility study. The EIS is supplied here already and coming in, and also I think with permitting, it's not a problem. So probably the next 6 to 9 months are getting really, really interesting. And as you heard, he's talking to off-takers, to strategic partners. So I suspect there will come a lot of good news over the next 6 months here. And as you know, the share price in the last 2 years already went up like 15 times. But we think it's still from here a double at least. And in a takeover, our feeling is, and really that's our projection, we think at least $6 to $7. If we go a little bit more progressive, it could be above 8. Let's see what happens. But the project is fantastic. The team around Farhad is doing a fantastic job. Really have a look onto Millennial Potash. Thanks for watching us, and bye-bye from Switzerland. Merry Christmas.